I'm joined by Ryan Vermette with the Brockton Enterprise, and we're here to talk Stonehill football. So thank you so much for joining me before the season opener.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, AJ. Excited that football's back. It's starting to get some of that fall weather, so it's an exciting time.
Yeah, getting colder over here for sure, and you know, having that first bye week, they're not starting in August. Just kind of a little bit of a different season, but going to be a cold weather start most likely for Stonehill this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with the bye week, there's been a couple teams I think in the NEC that have started, but like you said, a bit of a different year. They're going to be playing, pretty soon against Stony Brook here. So excited to get that first game underway.
Yeah, and just as a complete side note, I hate when they play the CAA teams just because it's flow sports. So if you're trying to watch every single one of these games and you've got to deal with flow, it's a complication. So I guess in the future, guys, more ESPN Plus games. Try taking on some of the teams that do that. Try taking on the Big South. They've got a nice contract with them.
Right. No, that's a another road we can go down for sure. All these streaming services, right? So
Yeah, so Stony Brook early on, of course, on Saturday, but this is a team in Stonehill where a lot of these NEC teams, they've really had the opportunity to kind of pick and choose where they want teams to come up from Division Two. Stonehill is one of those schools, but I guess unlike what we expect from Mercyhurst this year, some other schools, Stonehill's really shown a lot of success early on the past couple of seasons. The only team to beat Duquesne both years, only team to beat Duquesne last year. So, um, what are you seeing as far as continuity and what we should expect this year?
yeah, well, being at their practice a couple weeks ago, I can tell you that they're definitely looking to improve upon, the second place finish where there were, a cluster of teams that finished second in the division last year. Like you said, only team to beat Duquesne, what they won the championship last year. They're the only team to beat them the last couple seasons. But just from being at their practice, there was definitely a lot of energy. There was a hunger, a bit of chippiness too. Not in a bad way. Just seems like the guys were really ready to compete. And after talking to some of the players, they really have their sights set on an NEC title this year, despite losing some guys, to graduation as well as transfers. They still feel like they have a lot of talent. You mentioned continuity. I think they're ready to make another leap this season.
Yeah, and probably the best or biggest returning piece they've got is at quarterback. You got Asher Craw. You got to see him, I guess, throwing live. This time he's healthy. What were you seeing from him? What are you expecting this year?
Yeah, so I mean, after talking to Coach Eli Gardner, Asher, this is a guy who's been starting since his sophomore year. He had his first start in his second year in college, and then following that season, he had to have shoulder surgery, which really didn't give him much of an off season in terms of football workouts. Really more focused on recovery and trying to get that shoulder healthy. So last season, we didn't really get to see his full potential. This year, he said he's ready to go, make another leap. And despite the injury, he still had pretty similar numbers to his first year. So this is a guy, that's going to be coming into the season healthy with a full season of off-season football workouts. And especially, being a veteran, with, some guys, it's a little bit young in terms of the playmakers on offense. So I think he could have a, really good breakout season this year.
Yeah, and he's obviously the biggest piece that Stonehill has coming back, um, and there's some continuity for sure, but a lot of changes. You mentioned the transfer portal. Probably the biggest one to me, at least from a drama standpoint. Noah Canty, a big tight end. He actually went over to Duquesne, so we'll still see him this year if you're watching Stonehill games, but not in the way maybe you hope to.
Yeah, and going back to kind of that hunger, that energy that those guys came into the season with, they almost feel like they have a chip on their shoulder, trying to, put together a title contender, and I think that might add to the fire for them. I guess we'll find out. It's going to be Very entertaining game to look forward to when they do play Duquesne this year. That's definitely one to mark on the calendar. But yeah, that might just add a little more, to their to the fire that they have going into the season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's going to be probably. I don't think it's a probably. It's going to be definitely the most fun game, just because there is absolutely no way, right? Duquesne's overlooking Stonehill. Not that you would overlook them anyway. They've been one of the better teams in the NEC, but they get them October 26th, but in Stonehill, NEC front row. That's one of their front row games. But I guess for those of us who haven't been out to Stonehill, what's the atmosphere expected to be like? What are games over there?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Duquesne game, and when a team kind of beats you, consecutive seasons, it kind of starts to be a trend. That's definitely something like you said that you don't overlook. It's actually something that you end up kind of focusing in more on. I think these games. I think a lot of these games are going to be close. I think it's going to be a team that's probably going to be in most games that they play. Um, I think they got a game against UNH coming up in a couple weeks that could be interesting. But again, Duquesne can't overlook them. It wouldn't be a surprise if Stonehill beat them 3 times in a row, or if it's a competitive game that Duquesne ends up, finally, conquering conquering them over the last few seasons. So I think, offensively, I think the team's got a lot of talent. Defensively, I think there's a few guys that could step up into some vacant roles that were left there, by transfers and graduating seniors. So I expect a lot of entertaining games out of this team this year.
Yeah, and I guess just talking about the non-conference schedule, you brought up UNH. There are two independents in FCS, and Stonehill gets both of them. Of course, they used to be NEC members, Merrimack and Sacred Heart. They're going to get both of those games. Stony Brook in New Hampshire, or UNH, of course, a bit of a scholarship disadvantage with the NEC. And then they're going to take on Lafayette. It's one of their ESPN Plus games. They're going to have two this year. That one and the game against Wagner, which is one of the NEC on ESPN Plus games. I guess just starting with the non-conference schedule, anything you've got highlighted, anything you find to be particularly interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just looking at the schedule from last year or, the past couple seasons, this is a team that played Georgetown and they beat them. Not that Georgia's or excuse me, Georgetown's a powerhouse football school by any means, but still a big name brand in terms of just colleges in general. So I think this team, they're not afraid to play anybody, whether it's Duquesne, a team that's been at the top of the NEC, or teams like UNH and Lafayette and Wagner, like you mentioned. So I think they're ready to play anybody, anytime, anywhere, and that's why I think all these games could be really close this season.
Yeah, and then I guess just jumping into conference play, obviously it's an 8-team league. This year, effectively seven. Mercyhurst is not playing every team. One team they're not playing this year is Stonehill. But, um, 6 games on the calendar. Obviously, the Duquesne one, homecoming as well, is going to be a big one. Any of the other games you're excited to see that Stonehill take on this year? Anything you have on your calendar?
Yeah, I think just UNH. I think just the opening game against Stony Brook. I think it'll be just good to see what the identity of this team is. And I think that game specifically, just to see Asher, see what he looks like this year, coming off of a fully healthy off season, and just kind of see what the identity of this team really is. And I think that'll kind of set the tone for the upcoming season. So that's one I got my eye on. UNH, it's a fairly prominent FCS school. That I think that could be a great game. And then said it a couple times already, but that Duquesne game is one that I really have marked on the calendar.
So when I talked to Coach, he'd really, kind of emphasize to me 18, 19-year-olds, younger team, actually limited amount of all NEC players. It's a situation where I think they've got the second best quarterback in the NEC, but Darius Parentes has a shot of Sundays, so you can't
Yeah.
really. It's no fault of Asher Karajas that he's not number one on that list. But I guess when you saw the practice, again, thinking it's a younger team. You know, is it gelling early? Is it something where you think it's going to need some time before they can come together?
Yeah, I think it might be a mix of both, right? It's college, so every year, you're going to have new guys stepping up with, maybe some slightly different schemes that are fitted more towards certain players. It's not like this is the NFL where you have guys signed on for, 7, 8, 9 years, and they kind of build, this long chemistry together. But there are some returning players. I think, at wide receiver and running back, there's guys that are returning that were, second or third on the team in terms of yardage. So I think there's already a little bit of rapport there. But again, to be kind of one of the more dominant, offenses in the NSC, there needs to be, a step up in that chemistry. So yeah, I would say, it's a mixture of both, as it, probably is for a lot of other colleges.
Sure. And then I guess there's been some back and forth. The NEC is not covered particularly strongly on a national or even regional scale. So there's been reports both ways whether or not Stonehill is actually eligible for the NEC title. Answer is they are. However, not in the playoffs. But I guess handicapping it for me, you know, do you see this team as having a legitimate opportunity to finish number one? Do you think they're top half, bottom half of the standings?
Yeah, you can't, rule any team out, I guess, this early, but I would say, there is definitely a chance, just, considering how well they've done after moving into the NEC. They've clearly shown that they can beat, some of the top teams, in the conference. I think losing, their top wide receiver and running back, I think that does definitely hurt. However, it's really going to be dependent on some of these younger guys that are going to be coming into more prominent roles. They contributed, a decent amount last season, but they're really going to have to kind of step into those, big roles this year. I think a lot of it is really going to depend on the offense, how Asher looks, and like we talked about with the chemistry. So I do give them, a decent outside shot at it. If not, top quarter of the conference. I think last year going 500 at home, they need to improve upon that a little bit. Going 500 on the road, nothing to shake your head at. I think that's actually pretty solid. I think with that 2-2 record last year, though, they got to improve that if they really want a chance at the title.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely. When the teams hit harder, a lot of NEC teams have new guys coming in, decently hit hard in conference by the transfer portal, but
Yeah.
probably especially Stonehill with the top receiver, their tight end, their top running backs gone, losing some key defensive players to graduation. But did have one All NEC member over at defensive back. So do you and Coach Gardner's got this defensive background. Do you see this team as obviously having the quarterback, but I mean, should we look for a strong defense from them? Or did you see good things when you had the chance to watch them?
Yeah, when they were doing 11 on 11s when I was there, at practice, the offense had scored a couple times, but towards the end, the defense really started to make some plays, lock them down, and they're letting them know it a little bit too, right? Which is going back to that competitive nature, which I think is great, and that's going to help the team this year. But yeah, I think there were guys that were making plays in the secondary. Gershon Safrant, he's a junior local kid. He's looking to make a big leap this year and be one of the leaders in the secondary. Yeah, so I think there is definitely potential, for the defense to be kind of a force for this team this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jordan Irvine. I guess just kind of getting to the last couple of questions here. Obviously, we're over here at NEC Blitz, just very interested, invested in Northeast football. On the FBS level, it got kind of pulled apart a little bit. Makes the NEC pretty special. You cover a lot of football in New England and this area. So, I mean, do you think there's anything special or different about Northeast football and you've been able to see?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I think my answer has definitely changed after what Boston College did to Florida State last night. That was pretty cool to watch. I think this is obviously a narrative that, at least college football in the Northeast isn't as prominent as it is in other areas of the country. But Bill O'Brien, winning his first game at Boston College last night, I think the team's going to be a lot better than people think. Florida State, that's another topic that we can save for another day. But I think just, starting with Boston College, I mean, that's one of the biggest, prominent teams around here. And then I think, trickling down, I think, a team like Stonehill, though it's a smaller division, it's not FBS and they're not in the ACC like Boston College. But, it's a team like we talked about that might have an outside shot at a title. And in a place where we're used to winning football championships, right? I think, having some teams that could really be surprises this year, like Stonehill from a smaller point and Boston College from a bigger point. I think it's great. Hopefully this is something that Northeast football can build on over the next few years.
All right, so Ryan, Brockton Enterprise Sports, great follow on Twitter or X if you prefer. Anything else you want to talk about you're doing or involved with?
Yeah, I think that's it for the most part. Week one of football on the South Shore, which is, that's my predominant coverage area. That's going to be starting this Thursday. I'm really excited to get that going. I think high school football is great. It's just it's a fun atmosphere to watch the kids take the field under the lights, and I'm excited to get that going. So stay tuned for all the coverage.
Yeah, keep an eye on Brockton Enterprise Sports. You're going to see a lot of players, a lot of kids there that are going to end up in our leagues. So, really fun follow. Can't recommend it enough. And Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for having me on, AJ. I appreciate it.